Welcome to Supply Chain Talks. My name is Kristian Mortensen. I'm a Senior Director, Global Partnership and Alliances at project44. And today, I'm also your host for Supply Chain Talks. project44 has hand-curated a strong partner network to extend and enable the best possible customer experience. During 2021, we welcome you to our partner series, Supply Chain Talks. These conversations touch on current developments in global supply chains and the world of logistics. And today, we happily welcome Mr. Michael Eichstedt to Supply Chain Talks. Michael is a Senior Manager of Freight and Logistics at Accenture. Michael, thank you. I'm positively pleased to have you join.
Thank you, Kristian. Thanks for having me today.
No problem. Michael, perhaps let's try to start a little bit with Accenture, because I'm sure everyone really knows this name. This is a global, well-known name, but maybe you can clarify a little bit what Accenture really is all about.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's not that easy to answer, right? But let me try to do it like that. Our CEO describes it like that. She says, what Accenture is about is this: to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity, right? Basically, this is a very nice attempt to try and summarize what Accenture is about. As you know, we're a pretty big firm, but basically it's these two things. And let me even start with human ingenuity, because it's about the people we work with, the colleagues we work with, the talent we have on board to basically work together with our clients worldwide. And well, we need smart people. We need people to understand the business challenges of our clients. And we also use technology to make it happen. It's not only about technology, but certainly technology in this digital world of nowadays is definitely a key part of what we're doing and what Accenture is indeed about.
Thanks, Michael. You're based in Germany and you work for the whole DACH region. And if you don't yet know what is DACH region, actually that's Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And Michael, you work with freight and logistics. Could you share some details on what type of projects are you engaging on with your clients?
Exactly, absolutely. So you mentioned two important points, right? Freight logistics is indeed the industry that I and my direct colleagues work with me, which means our partners and clients we work with are logistics service providers, carriers in the air freight and the ocean freight space, in the land transport, in the rail cargo space, also in the infrastructure space like ports and other infrastructure facilities. And I mean, the more interesting question is, what is it that we are actually doing with those clients? You're asking about the types of projects. Well, here again, it's a very broad bandwidth of projects that you could imagine. And usually when I try to explain to clients, customers of ours, what it is all about, well, usually we start to understand what the strategy looks like. So when dealing with senior executives at our clients, we understand what the technology, what a strategy looks like, what a tech roadmap looks like, what their business agenda looks like. And then basically you can drill it down. And drilling down means that this will eventually lead to different, challenges, different kind of projects you could imagine. And Accenture here is clearly active in almost all dimensions you could imagine. So like I said, it ranges from pure strategy projects over to more management consulting type of work, operations projects, could also be pure technology projects like systems implementations, system enhancements, and so on. In the management consulting area, of course, there's various dimensions, and I think we don't have enough time to really talk about all of them, but you could imagine change management, supply chain management, other functional areas of management consulting. And last but not least, very interesting for our industry, freight and logistics, also the core systems that are important. Think about the core TMSs, the core WMSs, core platforms in the market. Also here, we not only have a point of view, but also quite a few projects ongoing with important players in the industry.
Thank you, Michael. And let's talk about why people are using consultants, because if you look at 2020 and 2021, they really turn out to be turbulent years, both across land, sea, skies, creating waves of digital disruption that are redefining freight and logistics. What industry changes do you, through your work, observe?
Yeah, actually, well, what I tend to do is to say consulting is not that different from the logistics industry. Why? Because we service basically all industries, all the industry verticals that you could imagine. So there's a huge common ground. And if you look at what changes we observed during the pandemic in particular, well, let me start like this. Basically, the freight and logistics industry has been an industry that has reacted, of course, to trade flows that we observe in the world. So what happened to trade flows during the pandemic? Well, many countries, many industries went through a crisis. But again, what does crisis mean? Crisis did not mean that private consumers had necessarily less money to spend. Actually, we saw a switch from, people not going on vacation anymore, but actually spending the money for different things. Again, if you look at the B2C segment, what happened there, there's been a huge surge in e-commerce. People have been ordering online, and this has been so unprecedented. And as you all know, right, it's led to an unprecedented increase of demand. Many companies actually prepared for a downturn, for an economic downturn. But actually, since autumn last year, what happened is that we had a huge surge. People were ordering online. We did see quite a few backlogs when it came to capacity of containers, when it came to congestion at ports. And with that, actually, our industry was hit hard. And again, in two dimensions. On the one hand, demand was greater than supply, which has, led to increasing rates, especially in the ocean liner market. On the other hand, right, we did see some operational issues, quite a few operational issues. Like I said, congestion being one of them, reliability being another one. And again, right, it's not that easy to answer because it really depends on the industry vertical you're looking at. I mentioned the B2C and consumer market, which definitely could benefit. If you look at other industry verticals like automotive or aerospace, well, they did not really benefit, at least not in the first place. Let's see how the outlook is going to look like. But indeed, it has been unprecedented, right? And yes, our industry was impacted, and there's been quite a few changes indeed. Let me just stress one more point, right? And then I'll really try to answer your question here. Like I said, logistics usually tended to react to supply chains, and supply chains are about to change. We observed it already nowadays, and we will see more changes to come. I just give you one example. If you look at where industrial companies or manufacturers used to produce, well, obviously China has been a main market here, or a main country to produce. We do see some tendencies that Eastern Europe is going to benefit, which means that depending on where your consumer markets are, where you sell your stuff, you try to get closer to those markets. So for Europe, it would potentially be Eastern Europe. For North America, it would potentially be Central America. So, and this again, right, leads to changing supply chains, and logistics companies, be it the carrier side or be it the LSPs, will have to react to these changes that we observe and will observe also in the future.
Thank you for mentioning that Eastern Europe will benefit for these changes. Being that I'm based here in Eastern Europe, in the heart of Eastern Europe, in Vilnius, Lithuania. So that's of course very nice to hear. But what are the biggest challenges that companies face in adapting to these changes?
Yeah, so my first and simple answer is tech and talent. So let me try to elaborate what I mean by that. Technology is key to solving challenges, to responding to challenges that that freight logistics companies deal with. I've been speaking, in the recent weeks and months to many executives, not only in logistics companies, but also at the shipper side. So basically senior supply chain people and folks. And what they're saying is that sometimes, not only sometimes, actually quite often, they think, or they perceive that logistics companies could do more with the data they actually have, that they actually control, and then that they should be, using. In many cases, this doesn't really seem to be the case. And now you can, of course, ask the question, why is that? Well, what we find, and also what my personal observation is, that sometimes just missing capabilities, and here technology, right, and tools, visibility platforms can be an answer, right? Of course, it has to fit into the strategy and into the systems that you're operating day by day, but can be an answer and should be an answer. On the other hand, why did I say talent? Well, tech and talent go actually in conjunction, and you need to have the right people, the well-trained talent to really help you on those challenges, right? And we all know, we observe that in Accenture. We know that our competition is observing this. We know that our clients are observing this. It's not easy, right, to attract, allure, and retain the best talent. And this is clearly something that we observe. You need well-skilled data scientists to not only ask the right questions, but also to understand what the relevant data points are, how you could potentially make them relevant and meaningful to get to the desired outcomes, or even outcomes that you did not reckon with in the first place, but actually you stumble upon outcomes that might help you drive new discussions, approaching proactively your clients, be the shippers or the consignees, depending on the supply chains and Incoterms you're dealing with. But well, eventually this will be key. So again, to wrap it up, tech and talent, from my point of view, are the challenges that need to be solved, but can be solved.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, I agree with you. Data is the new oil, or the new very valuable commodity. How do you think, or do you think that we will see industry consolidation, perhaps increased supply chain complexity, and will there be regulatory changes that are reshaping the landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we will not only see it, but we are observing it already nowadays. And we have been observing this also due to the pandemic in the past 2 to 3 years also. And usually when we talk about consolidation, what do we mean by that? You can look at consolidation in 2 dimensions, of course. You can look at horizontal consolidation or integration, and vertical consolidation or integration. And this again can happen through M&A activities on the one hand side, but it can also happen, through strategic partnerships. So if I try to break this down and try to answer to your question, well, we do see not only horizontal integration, we have observed that in the past also, that companies basically, take over smaller ones, and there are some prominent examples, especially in Europe, but also in the emerging markets, Africa and Asia, that we clearly observe. We also see vertical integration. This is basically very interesting to observe, because by definition, vertical integration means that you move upstream or downstream the value chain based on the services you perform. To give you a very concrete example, if you look at an ocean liner, for instance, and the typically carrier business moving cargo from A to B, well, some of the ocean liners, especially some European ones, they're basically looking to integrate more vertically, which means in practice that they look at acquiring either forwarding activities and capabilities, so being also forwarder. Some of them even look at expanding the services into other mode of transports. Think of air freight, think of land transport, think of rail cargo. And another example would be that logistics service providers, usually asset-free or asset-light at least, they're looking at acquiring or building new capabilities in the supply chain advisory space. So basically also bringing new services to clients, potentially higher margin services. So this is also something that we observe very closely. And indeed, this is changing and consolidating the industry to a certain extent. Because in the end, we see 2 big things happening right now. One, like you said, is consolidation, and the other one is specialization, because if you cannot really grow significantly and don't want to be taken over, you need to be a niche player in your distinct business and area of services.
Thank you, Michael. We are sort of going toward the end, but could you share how do you see the rapidly increasing sustainability requirements impact freight and logistics, both, say, short and long term?
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever I have discussions with players in our industry, this topic comes up all the time, right? It's definitely on the plate of many CEOs and others as C-levels in the industry. And well, at the one hand, right, on the one we observed that this is pretty a topic that is super relevant for the society in general. So, if we go home and talk to our kids and our families, this is a topic that we stumble upon all the time. So it is relevant for people. It tends to be overhyped sometimes. But to answer your question, I do believe that first initiatives have been launched by many players already, be it on the shipper side in the ocean liner business, be it in the aviation space. One example here is the so-called sustainable aviation fuel, the SAF. Both airlines and also LSPs are experimenting with those new fuels. Also, the big fuel giants in the world are experimenting with alternative fuels, of course, which in turn are super relevant, especially for ocean liners. And on top to that, basically, also from the basically the investors will have a closer look at it, right? Really wrap it up. Because if you look at the so-called ESG criteria, so environmental, social, and governance criteria, those will be the ones with which companies will be measured. Also, when it comes to investors investing, for instance, in logistics companies or in shippers who are having a lot of goods to be shipped, to what extent those companies are becoming greener or not, right? So it will basically, it might have an impact on your stock price eventually. So to answer your question, yes, it will become more and more relevant, and we clearly observe that too.
Excellent. My last question, Michael. We really discussed, and you've been kind enough to share a lot of information here. Are you doing some kind of research in these areas?
Yeah, actually, absolutely right. So Accenture generally is conducting a lot of research of many industries. Now coming back to the industry that we work with, freight logistics, yes, we are also as a team working on what we call thought leadership on a regular basis. And yes, currently we're working on a piece of work which basically tries to answer the question, what is the logistics company of the future? What might it look like? Also looking at the hypothesis of what we call end-to-end logistics. So how relevant will so-called end-to-end logistics be? And actually, I just touched upon some of the elements, be it vertical integration, be it horizontal integration, points that we will also be dealing with. And yes, this piece of work is basically being created, and it should be launched soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. That brings us to the end. So thank you to you personally for joining Supply Chain Talks this week, but also thank you for the broader partnership with Accenture, both in the DACH region and more or less globally as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the very interesting interview. Yeah, looking forward to working with you together, and happy to receive comments and questions afterwards. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.